I have a brief message that I want to share with you, and I want us to just kind of hold this moment, this attitude of worship, because I feel like the word that God has given me, it kind of demands a response. It demands a response. And I believe that response is worship. I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that. I want to read just a passage, and then I'll let you go ahead and sit down for a moment. It's a passage found in Psalm 112, and it was probably a couple months ago. I was reading through my reading plan. I like to try to read through the Bible, and I came across this psalm, and it kind of grabbed me because of what the psalmist said in it. And I couldn't really identify with what the psalmist was declaring. So I kind of felt like this turmoil inside. And as I read it to you tonight, some of you might find yourself in that place. Psalm 112, it says this. It says, "Praise the Lord. Blessed are those who fear the Lord and who find great delight in his commands. Their children will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. Wealth and riches are in their houses, and their righteousness endures forever. Even in darkness, light dawns for the upright, for those who are gracious and compassionate and righteous. Good will come to those who are generous and lend freely, who conduct their affairs with justice. Surely," this is the part that I was struggling with, "surely the righteous will never be shaken. They will be remembered forever. They will have no fear of bad news. Their hearts are steadfast, trusting in the Lord." That's a powerful, powerful declaration to make. But what if you don't feel like that's true in your own life? It's hard to kind of know how to handle it. But I felt like God showed me something through this passage and another one that I hope will bring some clarity to maybe your situation if you're facing something. Father, I just pray that you would just take this word and that you would do something in our hearts that we need tonight. There's someone here, there's someone in Lancaster right now that God came to church feeling broken, feeling empty, feeling hurt, feeling like they don't know what's going on, living in confusion. And I pray, God, that somehow now that your word would just penetrate their hearts, that your spirit, God, would minister in a way that I cannot. God, I pray that you would build our faith tonight, that God, you would give us eyes to see what we cannot see. Give us ears to hear what we cannot hear. And give us hearts to receive what it is that you want to speak to us. Amen. You can go ahead and grab a seat for just a moment. I was reading this passage, and I was thinking to myself, is this guy a little delusional about life? You ever meet people that are just so incredibly positive about life, it's like nothing bad ever happens to them? It feels like that anyways, you know. And you see people, and every time you see them, they got a smile on their face and bouncing around and bubbly, and life is good, and it just seems perfect all the time, and you just think to yourself, boy, I wish I had what they had. That's kind of how I felt reading this. And we don't know exactly who it was. Most believe it was David that wrote it, but this was a song. This was a song. This was something that somebody was singing and somebody was declaring about the goodness of God. It says that good will come to those who are generous, and that light dawns on the righteous and compassionate, that wealth and riches are in their house. Surely the righteous will never be shaken. They have no fear of bad news. And I read this and I thought to myself, I must not fit into these categories. I guess I'm not righteous enough. I'm not compassionate enough. I'm not generous enough. I guess I must not fit into these categories, because when you see that the righteous will not be shaken, and you read that they have no fear of bad news, man, I'll tell you what, I'm reading that and I'm kind of thinking, I don't know that this is me. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. Because all I know is that I've had some shaking in my life. Is there anybody else here that would be honest enough to declare and say you've had a little bit of shaking in your life, maybe even recently? Yeah, there's people here saying, I've had some shaking in my life. Like, how am I supposed to reconcile this? The righteous will not be shaken. Am I not good enough? Am I not righteous enough? Am I not, because when you face some hard things in your life, you feel shaken. If you've ever been in an accident, you know the way you feel afterwards. You'll hear people say, I'm all shaken up. It shakes me up. If you've ever gone through a really difficult thing, if you've ever been delivered some bad news, you often will say, it's shaken me. I don't know if any of you, that's kind of what your experience has been. I don't know if I'm talking to anybody that's experienced a shaking in your life. Maybe a shaking in your finances. Maybe a shaking in your relationship. Maybe a shaking in your marriage. Maybe a shaking in your emotions. Maybe a shaking in dealing with your kids. Or maybe just a shaking in your heart, in your faith. Maybe your faith has been wavering because of what you're facing. And so you can feel a shaking happening all around you and wondering, why am I experiencing this? Why am I feeling this? Because he says, they will fear no bad news. Who doesn't fear bad news? Like, who doesn't fear bad news? Because when you get bad news, and the way it makes you feel, you instinctively begin to fear more bad news. When all you hear on the news outlet is bad stuff, when you hear about another terrorist act killing a bunch more people in the city of Toronto, when you flip on the news and all you hear is about the next bad thing that's happening, you almost can't help it but for fear to start to rise up inside of you. So I was a little perplexed, because I'm thinking to myself, I want the blessings that this guy sings about, but reality is telling me I feel a shaking. I feel a shaking. So I was kind of wrestling. I'm like, okay, God, I'm not feeling this. Sometimes you read something, you just go, I'm not feeling this. I'm not feeling this. And as I was kind of pondering this, God brought to mind another passage that I wanted to share with you. I was thinking about how the righteous will not be shaken. And then God kind of brought me to Hebrews chapter 12, and I wanted to read this to you, because I think God was trying to show me something for myself, but I believe that maybe he wants to show you something in your life today. In Hebrews chapter 12, the writer of Hebrews is talking about this experience that Moses and the Israelites had in the wilderness when God was leading them out of Egypt, and he takes them to Mount Sinai, and there they meet God on top of a mountain. And you can read about this in Exodus chapter 19. But when they meet God in that moment, a billowing smoke covers the top of the mountain. And Moses cries out to God, and God responds. And it says the moment that God speaks, the ground began to shake. They heard what seemed like a thunderous voice coming from the billowing smoke, and fear overtook them, and the ground began to shake all around them as they encountered the presence of God. The very voice of God is enough to shake the ground. And here's what the writer of Hebrews says in Hebrews 12:26 through 29. He says that at that time, his voice shook the earth. But now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. It said, therefore, now this is something that you have to sometimes declare by faith that you can't see. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. I'm reading that. I'm like, okay, God, you took me to Hebrews 12, and that's because I remember this passage about shaking, and I'm thinking, how do I reconcile these two? Hold on, the psalmist is talking about how good things go to the good, and how the righteous experience God's blessing, and how they experience light when everybody's got darkness, and how wealth and riches are in their home, and how their children are blessed, and how the righteous will never be shaken. But now I'm reading about when God comes and shows up, that there's a shaking. I'm a little confused. Which is it? Are we shaking or are we not shaking? I had an experience when I was about 15 years old that I would say shook me up a little bit. I encountered insane turbulence on an airplane. How many of you ever been in an airplane in some bad turbulence, like bad turbulence? I'm not talking about a little rumble and they put the seatbelt light on and you're like, come on, really? I'm talking about it was a transatlantic flight. We're flying over the ocean, 30,000+ feet in the air, and there was massive turbulence that we hit. I don't know all the physics of it, some massive air pocket that we hit. Not only did it begin to shake, but this was so bad that we hit some air pocket and the plane plummeted. It felt like 1,000 feet, it was probably 100, but the plane just dropped in the middle of flying over the Atlantic Ocean, 30,000 feet in the air. The plane just shoom, and people didn't have their seatbelts on, and they went whoop, and they went flying up, hit their head on the overhead bin. The bins popped open, luggage was flying out, pandemonium, people are screaming, and it happened in literally just a couple seconds of a drop, and all of a sudden, like the whole plane is shaking, and I'm telling you, it was one of the most frightening feelings ever. You wonder why I hate roller coasters, because things like that have happened in my life. And it just dropped, and the whole plane is shaking. And I'm going to tell you this, fear came over me like I had not experienced before. When you encounter something like this, I'm thinking it's over. We're done. I mean, it was pandemonium. It was crazy. I'm thinking we're going to die. This is it. I mean, it was a little bit extreme, but people are screaming. People are crying. Like, you literally think we're about to go down. And there was, in that moment, as I reflect back and I realized something, that when I got on that plane, I had put my trust in the pilot, and I had put my trust in the airplane that it would get me safely across the ocean. But then 30,000 feet in the middle of the flight, when things did not go smooth the way I thought, then plane began to shake. That's when fear began to take hold in my life. And all of a sudden I realized that what I was depending upon, what I'm trusting in, what my faith is in, is it's in the airplane. That's what's holding you up. That's what's keeping you from dropping and falling and dying, is the airplane. And my faith is in the airplane when you're in there. And all of a sudden I'm realizing, as God's showing me Hebrews 12, I'm realizing that this thought is that sometimes we place our faith in things that we think can hold us up, but the moment we hit some turbulence in life, what we discover is those things that our faith was in will not hold us up. When you experience a shaking in your life, all of a sudden you're going to find out very quickly what your faith is in. Let me ask you a question. What is the foundation of your faith? Because what I read the writer of Hebrews saying is that God may shake the very things that we're standing upon, because we have put our faith, here's what the writer said, in created things. Did you didn't see that, did you? Let me read that to you again.
The words, verse 27, once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken can remain. What's the foundation of your faith? What is it? Because I'm wondering if maybe God will allow us at times to experience a shaking so that we will discover the very things that we are resting upon, the very things that our faith is sitting upon might not be God, but it might be our confidence, it might be our ability to earn an income, it might be our ability to be a spouse, it might be our ability to be a good mom, it might be these things that we are putting our faith in, the created things. And so God sometimes, I believe, allows a shaking to happen in our life. He'll allow you to go through some storms. He'll allow you to experience some turbulence in your life so that He can strip away all the things that you were resting upon so that what remains can never be shaken. He's trying to show us what our foundation really is. If your foundation is a created thing, listen to me, it won't hold up to the turbulence of life. If your foundation is your ability to hold it all together, it won't hold up. If your foundation is your ability to earn wealth, it won't hold up. If your foundation is what you can do rather than who God is, it's not going to hold up. And so all of a sudden, as I'm reading this, I'm starting to understand something, because he says, therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, verse 28, let us be thankful and worship God. Listen, maybe the only way that you can even encounter or have an unshakable faith is if you go through a shaking. You might have to go through a shaking. But here's what I'm discovering. This is what I'm in the process. I felt a shaking in my life. I felt a shaking in my emotions. I felt a shaking in my faith. This is what I'm going through. This is what I'm processing. That's why I'm talking about it, because I'm here. And what I'm discovering is this: I can experience a shaking without being shaken. Hold on. You got to get this, because somebody got it. I can experience a shaking all around without being shaken. Now I'm starting to see what the psalmist was declaring by faith when he said in Psalm 112, verses 6 and 7, he said, surely the righteous will never be shaken. They will be remembered forever. They will have no fear of bad news. Their hearts are steadfast, trusting in the Lord. There's a big difference between being in a shaking and being shaken. There's a difference. I can encounter a shaking in my life, but I can also know that my faith will not be shaken in the midst of it. When your faith is on Jesus, when your faith is on a resurrected Jesus, when your faith is on Him and Him alone, and not how good you are, and not how great of a family that you have, and not what you can earn, but when your foundation is upon Him and Him alone, listen, that's what will keep the righteous from being shaken. That's what will give them a heart that is steadfast. That way, He didn't say that bad news won't come. Bad news will come, but you don't have to have fear of it. You don't have to have fear of it. And I love the response. The writer of Hebrews said, therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and worship God. Let's be thankful and worship God. And so I came to declare tonight that some of you that came here, you came to church and your world has been shaking all around you. There's so much uncertainty. You don't feel like you got a steady place to put your foot. You got an unsteady family situation, unsteady marriage, unsteady health, unsteady financial situation. It's unsteady. You're dealing with an earthquake. The ground is shaking all around you. I came to declare that what you need to do in that moment is you begin to worship God. You begin to thank God that what He's doing that you can't see is He's stripping away everything that you are holding on to so that what remains cannot be shaken. I'm saying, is there anybody here today that wants a faith that is steady, that is unshakable? Come on, if that's you, stand up to your feet tonight. Because I believe that we need to worship God tonight. I believe that we need to come. We might be broken. We might be hurting. We might feel like I don't see a way out of this. But if we will just begin to worship God, put your eyes upon Him. If you'll begin to see Him, and rather than your circumstance, when you begin to realize that He is doing something and He's shaking something out of your life, all of a sudden your perspective changes. All of a sudden you start to realize, I can worship in the middle of this. I can praise Him. He is good. He is good. He is God. He's still in control. Nothing is going to shake my faith because my faith is on Jesus.